Thank you, Brother Regent, for that more than generous introduction there. Charlie called me last summer and asked me if I'd be able to come to this event and speak to you, and I've been excited about that ever since because I'm always excited about being around the collegiate leadership of this fraternity. You guys have an enormous amount of optimism and enthusiasm. I take a lot from that, from your energy, and being around you restores my faith in and hope for the future of our great nation. So thank you for letting me be here with you this week. I thoroughly enjoy it. Those of you who have heard me speak in front of the fraternity before know that where appropriate, I like to begin my remarks with a story. And so today will be no different. I'd like to take you back to the fall of 1977. 95% of y'all weren't around in 1977. Some of your parents were. Mid-fall 1977, height of college football season, the number 1 ranked team in America came to visit the number 5 ranked team. Now, you probably say, well, that's probably where they had game day that week. Well, they didn't have game day because they had no ESPN, because there was no cable TV. There were only the 3 major networks and a fledgling company in Atlanta called Turner Broadcasting. But nevertheless, there was a huge crowd there that day. Our chapter home at the number 5 ranked host school had an oversized tailgate event that day. There were over 1,000 people at that event. The chapter property covered about 8 acres, big parking lot, big lawn, big house. There were 80 active brothers and their dates, their parents, hundreds of alumni, their family and friends were there. One particular alumni that was there that day was an alum that we're just going to call him George. At that time, George had been a knight for over 20 years and was actively involved in the chapter and made it his mission to make sure that the chapter was the best it could be. George rolled up to the house that day with his family in his country squire station wagon, parked in his designated tailgate spot next to our basketball goal, got out, set up his tailgate equipment, lit a cigar, made a cocktail, and started his game day ritual, which was to walk around the grounds to inspect every inch of it and then seek out the commander for a report on the condition of the chapter. That day, he found the young commander standing on the front porch of the house, looking out over the great lawn where hundreds of people were. He asked his normal questions, and the young commander reported, "We've just concluded rush. We've got one of the strongest pledge classes on campus. All our bills are paid. The brothers will date women only from the best sororities. As a matter of fact, last night we had the best party on campus leading up to this event." George remarked that while all that was well and good, there was a lot of work still to be done. And then, putting his right arm around the commander's shoulders, with his left hand swept across the crowd, he said 14 words that over 35 years later would literally change the way that we approach the business of this fraternity. He told that young commander, "Son, these men have elected you to lead them. You have an obligation to excellence." That obligation lives today for each and every one of us, whether you were elected by a collegiate chapter or the grand chapter. That is our obligation. In July of 2010, speaking before the 64th Grand Chapter, I said that we are the Legion of Honor. There is no honor in mediocrity. Honor can only be attained through excellence. Today I stand firmly behind those words, and to them I will add, the pursuit of excellence is fueled by a deep appreciation of our history, our traditions, and our heroes. Every brother in your chapter knows something about our national history. Our founding at VMI, founded on the principle of honor and in direct opposition to hazing. You probably know something about our move away from VMI into the south, to the west, and to the north. But how much do you and your chapter brothers know about your local history? You might know, hopefully you know, the year your chapter was founded. You might even know the different physical locations in which the chapter has operated. But you need to know the history, the operational history of your chapter, as Charlie referenced. Every one of our chapters has been through the peaks and valleys, whether it's the Mu chapter at Georgia, Epsilon at Oklahoma State. We've all had good days and bad. Know what got you into that situation and know what got you out of it. We were 2 heartbeats away from rolling up our charter and sending it back to Lexington. But Michael and John built that thing up with the help of 3 young men from Brad Beecham's staff, Russ Hammond, Chris Healy, and John Springer, who's here with us today. We started with 2 young men. Today we have 148. We've won 2 rock chapters in a row. And this summer in Nashville, Commander Jeff Brum, you bring a good pair of shoes, because if we don't win the 3rd, you're going to walk back to Georgia. 2012, the North American Interfraternity Conference named us the outstanding chapter of all fraternities in the United States. So it can happen. You can make it happen. So you understand your chapter's history. It hadn't always been rosy, and it hadn't always been bleak. There's ways to make this happen. So understand your history. Traditions. This is where I live, traditions. My first involvement at the national level was in 2006. Past Regent Jay Pitts appointed me to serve on an ad hoc committee to study our involvement with our alumni. We held a meeting in Dallas, Texas, of about a dozen alums down there to talk about ways we could really gin up some enthusiasm and involvement from our alumni. And I made a comment. I said, we should really promote more some of our chapter's traditions. You thought I'd said, we should go out and recruit women. The reaction I got from the audience, from the other 12 brothers, mouths dropped open, one got pushed back away from the table, and they're like, no, whoa, weak, no, not traditions. Traditions are bad. Traditions are the hazing, the panty raids, the scavenger hunts, and all this silly stuff that people do. My response was, well, Cheryl and Grace, I'm not going to tell you what my response was. But anyway, I basically said, no. Traditions are the charity bowl at Ole Miss, which has raised over $1 million for philanthropy. The border battle at Minnesota, which goes down the same path. The Crumley Alumni Dinner in Reno, Nevada, which is approaching its 100th year. The Mu Chapter Commanders Dinner in Atlanta, an annual event held every January for all our past commanders, where we have commanders who are not just from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, but we have commanders who are in their 70s, 80s, and 90s. It's traditions. When I became regent, and you go back and look at the tape of Grand Chapter, the very first thing I did was appoint Task Force Hopkins to go out and collect your best traditions, which became our best practices. Task Force Hopkins went to the chapters that have been continuously exhibiting excellence to find out why they were good. And that's where these best practices came from. We formed the best practices library from that. And somebody tweeted from that event that the best practices library was the owner's manual for excellence. And it probably is. I know Brad Beecham and I spent a lot of time during my early days of my regency working on this, and we had the realization that you could start a chapter from scratch. Give them the best practices library, have them follow that A to Z, and if they recruited the right men, they would have an excellent chapter. But that's not all you have to do. I don't know where you left your personal vehicles when you came here, the airport parking lot or whatever. You get back there and you got a flat tire. So you can pull out the owner's manual to your vehicle, you open it up, it's going to show you where the jack and the spare tire are located. But do you think you're going to blow on that owner's manual, rub it, shake it real good, and that tire's going to change itself? It won't. And that's where another thing that I want you to remember comes in. There's another ingredient there. In 1997, when my son was a pledged Beta Theta chapter at Auburn, visiting the house down there, I noticed many, many copies of a creed, not just the Sigma Nu creed, but another creed that were framed all over the house. And when you think about it, the words you're about to see really exemplify the job that we all have. It's right down to it. This is what makes it happen. I saw these words in 1997 for the first time. 2007. God, 2007, losing track of time. And they literally, I'm a diehard season ticket holding Georgia Bulldog. The jewels in this badge are red and black. But look at the first stanza of the Auburn Creed. I believe that this is a practical world and that I can count only on what I earn. Therefore, I believe in work, hard work. That's what it comes down to. You've got to put in the effort to make it happen. We can give you the resources, the best practices library, the staff support, your alumni support, but unless you put this into action, it's not going to happen. This is a practical world, guys. For us, there are no bailouts. There are no handouts. There's no free lunch. So we have to work hard to make it happen. Our history and our traditions. For our heroes, we have plenty of heroes at the national level. All of you have studied and read about Hopkins, Quarles, and Riley. You know of others, John C. Scott, Walter James Sears. Moving into more modern times, John Ward, Herman Wells, and the one I consider to be the greatest, the late Robert L. Marchman. But they're heroes at your chapter level, and that's what you need to understand also. You and your brothers need to know those knights who made it happen for you. It could be men like Tom Harkin, Gene Perry, Dr. Jimmy Davis, John Burgess, Lori Gaston, Neil Gilpin, John Hearn, and Michael Berry. Alumni who were able to bear down and get the job done. Collegiate leaders who became collegiate heroes, who were leaders who were faced with hard times. It's a pretty good deal to be the commander of a rock chapter when things are cruising along and everything's great. But in a tough situation, you find out who your real leaders are. Men like Andrew Crane and Bobby McMillan, Rob Herndon, Austin Harrison, Robert Corbin, to name a few. These are young men who got it started and made it happen. I've often been asked, who are my greatest Sigma Nu heroes? My greatest Sigma Nu heroes are a group of men. It starts with Brad Beecham. It's followed by the men who served on my high council and the ones who currently serve on this high council, and the 12 collegiate grand councilmen that served with us. You've all met the 4 that are here with us this year. Before that, we had Mark McClure, James Doty, Brett Hardig, and Matt Casper, Wells Ellenberg, Trey Oliver, Matt Tudor, and Tom Bymark. Why are they heroes? Because they are the men who had the vision to recognize excellence, to understand excellence and know that excellence had to be the number one strategic imperative for this fraternity. Because without excellence, you cannot have honor. They're also heroes because not only the vision they had, but the courage that they had and have. They had the courage for accountability, to hold you accountable and to be accountable themselves for the results. When we first rolled this out in 2010, there were plenty of naysayers that said this will never work. These collegiates don't want to have this accountability put on them. They want to deal more on the softer, fuzzy issues. Those people were wrong. You took to this with a passion. It took us a while to compile the best practices library, to get it organized, to get it out there, to start having the first of these leadership sessions, to teach you how to use it, to talk to you about excellence. But in the short time in the first biennium, we had a 60% increase in the number of rock chapters because you wanted excellence. When Charlie gives out the Rock Awards in Nashville this summer, the stage will overflow because excellence has caught on and lives within this fraternity. Let's go back to the story at the beginning. The young commander and George. Ollie, let's take a look at that young commander. Look at that handsome rascal right there now. He always remembered who told him he had an obligation to excellence. He and George stayed good friends over the years. They served on the House Corporation together. They had successful careers. They both raised families, initiated their sons into the Legion of Honor. But in April of 2012, an opportunity presented itself. Combination of history, traditions, and heroes. The occasion was spring initiation at their chapter. And as to tradition, many dozen alumni returned to attend the initiation. It was even more special because it was the occasion of George's grandson's initiation, and about a dozen of the alumni there were from his era. So, in front of 140 brothers, about 50 alumni, the young commander repaid George, Ali, by presenting the Regent's Medallion of Merit Award to Judge George J. Hearn III for a lifetime of dedication to the principles of the Legion of Honor. Let's leave that up there just a minute because this picture is about history, traditions, and heroes. You see the gray-headed fellow to the left there? That's Dr. Werner Chafin. He's 95 years old. In 2009, Regent Gilman presented him with the Regent's Medallion of Merit. Dr. Chafin was our commander on Pearl Harbor Day. That was in 1941, for those of you who hadn't studied that. Still very active with the chapter today. He was a professor at the University of Georgia Law School, and one of his students was Judge George Hearn. That's the history, the tradition of alumni returning to participate in initiations. And those two men are my heroes. We're the Legion of Honor. There is no honor in mediocrity. Honor is only attained through excellence, the pursuit of which is fueled by an appreciation of our history, our traditions, and our heroes. Our men have elected us to lead them to excellence, and we will. Because we come here from Long Island, New York, and McCandless Township, Pennsylvania. We come from Mangum, Oklahoma, and Andalusia, Alabama. We're from Charleston, we're from Cleveland, we're from Springfield and Sylacauga, we're from Monroe, Georgia, and Minneapolis, Minnesota. Regent Charlie Idle was raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma. One day they'll take me back to the small town of Bowden, Georgia. And this week, we are, as our song says, rocked in the cradle of old Virginia, and we are the Knights of the Legion of Honor. Thank you very much.